My name is Grace. I'm 29, and I built a tech empire while everyone thought I was just riding my boyfriend's coattails. For 10 years, I believed Ryan Mitchell and I were partners in every sense business and romance, dreams and reality. We started TechFlow Solutions in his garage, survived on ramen and caffeine, and turned our AI automation startup into a San Francisco success story worth 8 figures. But last Tuesday night, I came home from a client dinner reeking of wine and corporate desperation, only to find Ryan welcoming his white moonlight into our Marina District apartment. Sophia Blair recently divorced, effortlessly elegant, and unfortunately bearing an uncanny resemblance to me, as Ryan nervously explained that his old friend needed a place to stay. I watched him transform into someone I'd never seen before, a man willing to sacrifice his girlfriend's comfort for another woman's convenience. "You don't understand," he said, stepping protectively in front of Sophia when I objected. She has nowhere else to go. I understood perfectly. After a decade together, I wasn't the woman he protected, I was the obstacle he managed. That's when I realized I'd been playing a game where I never knew the rules, competing with a ghost I couldn't see, and losing to a woman who'd never even tried. Sophia Blair had always been Ryan's white moonlight, that untouchable, perfect love that exists more in memory than reality. She was everything I apparently wasn't, serene like a lotus flower, never fighting for anything, because everything simply fell into her lap. While I hustled across the Bay Area chasing contracts and grinding through client presentations, Sophia would smile that maddeningly peaceful smile and say, "Clients have discerning eyes. Grace, if you're truly capable, they'll come to you. No need to chase." When I questioned the obvious tension between her and Ryan, she'd tilt her head with practiced innocence. "I don't know what to say about your concerns, Grace, but I trust that truth lives in people's hearts." But when TechFlow hit our first major crisis, a competitor undercutting our prices, while our biggest client threatened to walk, Sophia suddenly became a business strategist. Maybe lower your prices, reduce profit margins a little. At worst, you could cut employee salaries. Under her serene guidance, Ryan's confidence crumbled while mine soared. Our company started bleeding money and talent, but somehow, every disastrous decision felt reasonable when it came from Sophia's gentle lips. The night I discovered them together, really together, I just closed the biggest deal of my career. Marcus Thompson from Horizon Corp had finally signed our enterprise contract worth $2 million. I should have been celebrating. But instead, I was stumbling home at midnight, exhausted and slightly drunk from the obligatory client dinner. That's when I saw them through our floor-to-ceiling windows, Ryan hanging on every word as Sophia spoke, their heads bent close together like conspirators or lovers. She was wearing one of my blazers, the Armani one I'd bought after our first $1 million quarter. I stood in our doorway, watching this stranger wear my clothes in my home while my boyfriend looked at her like she'd just solved world peace. "Grace." Ryan jumped up, guilt written across his face in neon letters. "You're back early. Am I?" I checked my phone. 12:47 a.m. Feels pretty late to me. Sophia rose with liquid grace, smoothing down my blazer with manicured fingers. "Grace, I hope you don't mind. I spilled wine on my dress." And Ryan offered. Of course he did. I dropped my purse on the marble counter, the sound echoing through our suddenly too small apartment. Ryan's always been generous with other people's belongings. The tension in the room could have powered our servers for a week. Ryan cleared his throat. running his hands through his hair, a nervous tell I'd learned to read in our early startup days. Grace, I need to tell you something. Sophia's going through a difficult divorce. She needs somewhere to stay temporarily while she sorts out her living situation. Temporarily. I repeated the word like it was foreign. How temporarily? Just until I find my own place, Sophia interjected, her voice carrying that particular brand of helplessness that made men want to rescue her. I know this is awkward, but I really have nowhere else to go. Ryan was always so kind to me in college. Another word that tasted wrong in my mouth. Right, the good old days. Ryan's jaw tightened. Grace, don't be like this. It's just temporary. And she's going through a hard time. Can't you be understanding for once? For once, as if compassion wasn't my default setting. As if I hadn't spent 10 years understanding his every mood, supporting his every dream, building his every success with my own hands. But I was tired, bone-deep, exhausted from a day of performing competence for clients who question my every recommendation. From smiling through condescending comments about young women in tech, from pretending that earning respect was easy when you looked like me in rooms full of men who looked like Ryan. So instead of fighting, I did something that surprised all three of us. I laughed. You know what? You're absolutely right. I kicked off my heels. Watching Ryan's confusion deepen, Sophia should stay here. In fact, she should take the master bedroom. I'll sleep in the guest room. Grace Ryan started. No, seriously, this is perfect. I was warming to the theme now, my exhaustion transmuting into something sharp and bright. Sophia needs a place to stay, and I need to understand exactly what I've been competing with for 10 years. Win-win. Sophia's perfectly composed mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something calculating underneath. But she recovered quickly, clasping her hands together in manufactured gratitude. That's so generous of you, Grace, but I couldn't possibly take your room. The guest room is more than enough. I insist. I smiled with enough warmth to power a small city. After all, you're going through such a difficult time. It's the least I can do. Ryan looked between us like a man watching two tigers circle each other, finally sensing the danger, but unsure which one might pounce first. That night, I lay in the guest bed, my own guest bed, in my own apartment, listening to Sophia's soft laughter drift through the walls. They weren't doing anything inappropriate, at least not physically, but something about their easy intimacy, the way Ryan's voice dropped to that particular cadence he used when he was truly comfortable, told me everything I needed to know. I stared at the ceiling and did the math. 10 years of my life. 10 years of building a business, building a relationship, building a future with a man who'd been using me as a placeholder for someone else. The worst part, I was good at math. Around 3 a.m., I heard Sophia say something that made my blood turn to ice water. 15 years later, and you're still wearing this watch. Never took it off. Ryan replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. His Omega watch. The one he claimed his mother gave him for college graduation. The one I'd helped him get serviced dozens of times. The one I'd complimented by saying his mom had great taste. 15 years ago, Ryan was a college sophomore. 15 years ago, Sophia was his college sweetheart who'd gone to study abroad in London. The pieces clicked into place with the devastating precision of a well-coded algorithm. I'd spent a decade maintaining a watch that commemorated another woman's love. I'd been playing house with a man who kept souvenirs of his real relationship while treating ours like a practice round. That's when I stopped being hurt and started being something much more dangerous, strategically angry. If Ryan wanted to keep his white moonlight, he was welcome to her. But he'd find out exactly what he was losing when he chose nostalgia over partnership, fantasy over reality. And I'd make sure the lesson was comprehensive. I rolled over, pulled out my phone, and started making lists. Tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of my life, a life where I stopped being anyone's consolation prize and started being exactly what I'd always been, the woman who got things done. Ryan Mitchell had no idea what he'd just unleashed, but he was about to find out. I'd always known about Ryan's white moonlight. In 10 years together, you learn a man's mythology, the stories he tells about himself, the version of his past that makes him feel noble and romantic rather than ordinary and human. Sophia Blair had been the golden girl of their computer science program at UC Berkeley. Beautiful, brilliant, well-connected through her venture capitalist father, and possessed of that particular brand of effortless perfection that made everyone else feel like they were trying too hard. She was the kind of woman who never seemed to study but somehow graduated summa cum laude, who never chased opportunities but had them delivered on silver platters. Ryan had fallen hard, the way 19-year-old boys fall for the first woman who seems both attainable and impossible. They'd had that almost relationship that exists in the gray space between friendship and romance, intense enough to leave scars, ambiguous enough to fuel decades of what-ifs. When Sophia left for her PhD program at Oxford, Ryan convinced himself it was a tragic love story rather than a simple case of her having better options. She'd been kind in her rejection, which somehow made it worse. Kind rejection from a woman like Sophia feels like being gently murdered by an angel. I thought I understood all of this. I thought I'd made peace with dating a man who kept a shrine to his college crush in the corner of his heart. What I hadn't understood was that I wasn't just dating a man with emotional baggage. I was dating a man who'd built his entire relationship template around the woman he'd lost. Now, sitting in my own guest room at 6 a.m. with a cup of coffee and my laptop, I could see the pattern with brutal clarity. Every preference Ryan had expressed about my appearance, every suggestion about my personality, every way he'd shaped our relationship, it had all been an unconscious attempt to recreate Sophia Blair. My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant. Marcus Thompson wants to schedule the contract signing for Thursday. His office, or ours. I smiled for the first time in 12 hours. Hours. I typed back, Conference Room A, full presentation setup. The Horizon Corp deal was my ace in the hole. The one contract I'd landed entirely through my own network, my own expertise, my own late nights learning their business model until I could recite their pain points in my sleep. Ryan had barely been involved beyond signing off on the technical specifications I'd drafted. If I was about to burn my life down, I wanted to make sure I had something fireproof to land on. I spent the morning working from the guest room, partly because I had calls scheduled and partly because I wanted to observe the Sophia show from a distance. She emerged from the master bedroom around 10 a.m. wearing one of my silk robes, her hair falling in perfect waves that would have taken me 40 minutes and 3 products to achieve. "Good morning, Grace," she said with that gentle smile that never quite reached her eyes. "I hope we didn't keep you awake last night." Ryan and I had so much catching up to do. Not at all. I lied smoothly. I'm a heavy sleeper. Ryan appeared moments later, already dressed for the office, but moving with the relaxed energy of a man who'd had his worldview validated. He kissed my forehead, a perfunctory gesture that felt more like marking territory than showing affection. "I'll probably be late tonight," he said. "Sophia and I are going to grab dinner, help her get oriented with the city again. You don't mind, right?" The old Grace would have minded. The old Grace would have felt the familiar twist of jealousy and insecurity, would have wondered what was wrong with her that her boyfriend preferred another woman's company. The new Grace, the one who'd spent a sleepless night recalibrating her entire understanding of her relationship, just smiled. "Of course not. I have work to catch up on anyway." What I actually had was a plan to execute after they left together. In Ryan's Tesla, like a couple heading off to their shared life, I got to work. First, I called my lawyer, not our company lawyer, who owed his loyalty to TechFlow Solutions, but my personal attorney, the woman who'd helped me patent 3 of our core algorithms in my name alone, Deanna. I need to understand my options for extracting myself from a business partnership. Extracting yourself or protecting your interests. Both. How messy is this going to get? I looked around the apartment that Ryan and I had chosen together, decorated together, filled with 10 years of shared life and separate dreams. The next call was to Marcus Thompson's office. "I'd like to move our signing meeting to today if possible. Something's come up that might affect our timeline. This afternoon work for you? I'm curious about the urgency. Let's just say I believe in being proactive about business continuity." By the time Ryan and Sophia returned from their orientation dinner at 11 p.m., I had spent the day restructuring my entire professional existence. My key patents were already solely in my name, a bit of paranoid planning from our early days that now felt prophetic. My client relationships were documented and portable. My technical team was more loyal to me than to the company letterhead. Most importantly, I'd started the paperwork to extract my 51% stake from TechFlow Solutions. They came home laughing about some shared memory from college, their voices carrying the easy intimacy of people who'd known each other before life got complicated. Sophia had changed into a little black dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. And Ryan had that particular glow men get when they feel like the protagonist of their own story. Grace. Sophia practically floated over to where I sat reading on the couch. "We brought you leftovers from this amazing little French place in Nob Hill. Ryan said it's where you two had your first date." Actually, our first date had been at a taco truck outside a coding boot camp, but I wasn't about to correct her. Ryan had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "That's very thoughtful," I said, accepting the carefully packaged container. "How was the city orientation?" "Amazing." Sophia sighed contentedly. "It's incredible how much San Francisco has changed, but Ryan knows all the best spots. We went to this adorable little gallery in the Mission, and then dinner, and then we walked along the Embarcadero, talking about old times. It felt like coming home." Ryan was studying my face, clearly trying to gauge my reaction to his ex-crush, describing their evening in terms typically reserved for romance novels, when I just smiled pleasantly and thanked them for thinking of me. His confusion was almost comical. "How was your day?" he asked, settling onto the couch beside me with the careful distance of a man trying not to provoke conflict. "Productive. I moved our Horizon Corp signing to tomorrow." Actually, Marcus Thompson was eager to finalize things. "Tomorrow?" Ryan frowned. "I thought we agreed to review the terms together first." "We did review them 3 weeks ago, unless you want to suggest changes that might jeopardize a $2 million contract." Sophia perched on the edge of the coffee table like a graceful bird, her eyes bright with interest. $2 million. That's wonderful. Though I have to say, Grace, you seem to put a lot of energy into chasing these deals. Back at Stanford Business School, they taught us that the best clients come to you when you've established real value. All this networking and relationship building, it can seem a bit desperate. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan shot Sophia a warning look, but she just smiled serenely, as if she'd offered helpful career advice rather than a carefully disguised insult. "You're absolutely right," I said finally. "Chasing clients is exhausting. That's why I've decided to be more strategic about my business relationships going forward." "That sounds smart," Ryan said, relief evident in his voice that I wasn't starting a fight. "I'm glad you think so, because I've scheduled a meeting with our lawyers tomorrow to discuss restructuring TechFlow." Restructuring. Now Ryan looked genuinely concerned. "What kind of restructuring?" "The kind where we formalize our roles and responsibilities. Make sure everyone's contributions are properly recognized and compensated." It wasn't technically a lie. I was planning to restructure everything, just not in the way Ryan assumed. Sophia clapped her hands together like a delighted child. "That sounds wonderful. It's so important to have clear boundaries in business partnerships. Ryan always speaks so highly of your administrative skills." Administrative skills? I smiled at her with enough warmth to power a small solar array. "Thank you. Sophia, I've always believed in the importance of handling the details that others might overlook." That night, I lay in the guest bed listening to their continued conversation through the walls. They weren't being deliberately loud, but the apartment's open concept design made privacy impossible. Every laugh, every reminiscence, every comfortable silence felt like evidence in a case I was building against my own life. Around midnight, I heard Sophia say, "It must be nice, having someone who takes care of all the business development while you focus on the technical work. Grace is incredible at what she does," Ryan replied. And for a moment, I felt a flicker of the old warmth. Then Sophia's voice, gentle as a knife. "Of course she is. It's just that when you're truly exceptional at something, opportunities seek you out. Look at how easily you've maintained your reputation in the industry. Natural talent always rises to the top." "I suppose you're right." And just like that, my 10 years of grinding, networking, relationship building, and strategic thinking became administrative skills that any competent person could handle. My success became a byproduct of Ryan's natural talent rather than evidence of my own. I pulled out my phone and sent 3 messages. To Diana, my lawyer, move as fast as legally possible on the partnership dissolution. To Marcus Thompson, looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. I have some exciting news about our future collaboration. To myself, saved in drafts. Remember this feeling. Remember exactly how it felt to be erased in real time. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of extracting myself from a life that had never really been mine. But tonight, I lay in my own guest bed and felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The crystalline clarity that comes from finally understanding the game you've been playing. Ryan thought he was getting his white moonlight back. What he was actually getting was a front row seat to watching everything he'd taken for granted walk out the door. And unlike his college crush who drifted away with gentle regret, I was going to make sure he understood exactly what he'd chosen to lose. The Horizon Corp signing was scheduled for 2 p.m., which gave me exactly enough time to execute the first phase of my exit strategy. I woke up at 5 a.m., not because I'd slept well, but because my internal alarm clock had recalibrated itself for maximum productivity. Ryan and Sophia were still asleep, or at least still behind the closed door of what used to be our bedroom when I left for the office. I'd laid out a fresh suit the night before, the navy Armani I'd bought to celebrate our first $1 million in revenue, paired with the Louboutin heels that added 3 inches to my height and 10 years to my gravitas. If I was going to burn bridges, I wanted to look spectacular doing it. My first stop was the office of Janet Reyes, our head of engineering and the person most responsible for turning my algorithms into commercially viable products. Janet had been with us for 6 years, hired directly out of her PhD program because I'd recognized something in her that other companies had overlooked: the rare combination of technical brilliance and practical business sense. Grace, you're here early. Janet looked up from her code review, her workspace characteristically organized chaos of monitors, whiteboards, and empty coffee cups. Everything okay? You look like you're dressed for war. Something like that. I closed her office door and settled into the chair across from her desk. Janet, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Her expression grew serious. Okay, if I were to start my own company tomorrow, would you consider joining me? Janet leaned back in her chair, studying my face with the same intensity she brought to debugging complex systems. Are you planning to start your own company tomorrow? I'm planning to start my own company today. Jesus. Grace, what happened? I gave her the abbreviated version partnership conflicts, misaligned vision, the need for a fresh start. I didn't mention Sophia or the personal betrayal that had catalyzed my decision. Janet was brilliant, but she didn't need to know that her CEO was having a spectacular relationship meltdown. The Horizon Corp contract. Janet said slowly, "That's yours, isn't it? Your relationship, your negotiation, your technical specifications. It is, and you want to take it with you. I want to honor my commitment to Marcus Thompson with the best possible team and technology. If that means building a new company around that relationship, then yes." Janet was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against her desk in the pattern she used when she was working through a particularly complex problem. What about Ryan? What about him? Grace, you two built this company together. You've been partners for 10 years. Are you really ready to just walk away from all of that? I thought about Ryan and Sophia laughing together in the hallway, about the gentle way she'd corrected my desperate networking style, about the watch he'd never stopped wearing. Janet, have you ever been in a relationship where you slowly realized you'd been auditioning for a role that was never really available? She nodded thoughtfully. My ex-girlfriend used to compare me to her first love constantly, never favorably. Then you understand. I understand. She paused, then smiled with the kind of fierce loyalty that had made her my first hire 6 years ago. When do we start? By 10 a.m., I had commitments from 5 of our 7 core technical staff members. By 11 a.m., I'd secured a credit line sufficient to fund operations for 18 months. By noon, I'd signed a lease on a stunning office space in Soma that would be available the following week. By 1:30 p.m., I was sitting in TechFlow's largest conference room across from Marcus Thompson, watching him review the contract terms while Ryan fidgeted beside me, like a man who'd suddenly realized he wasn't the main character in this story. "Everything looks excellent," Marcus said, his silver pen poised over the signature line. "I have to say, Grace, working with you has been refreshing. You have a way of anticipating needs before they become problems." That's very kind of you to say. It's not kindness, it's accuracy. Which is why I'm even more excited about this next phase of our partnership. Ryan leaned forward. Next phase. I smiled at Marcus with genuine warmth. I haven't had a chance to update Ryan on our conversation yesterday. Marcus, would you like to explain? Or should I? Marcus looked between us with the slight confusion of a man who'd stumbled into someone else's drama. Well, Grace mentioned that she's launching her own venture, Innovate Tech, and asked if Horizon would be interested in an exclusive partnership for our AI infrastructure needs. Given the quality of work she's delivered, it was an easy yes. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's face went through several interesting color changes before settling on a pale green that matched his expression of dawning horror. Grace, he said carefully, could we have a moment to discuss this privately? Of course. I turned to Marcus with professional composure. Would you mind giving us a few minutes? There's excellent coffee in the break room, and I believe Sarah from marketing wanted to discuss some publicity opportunities around the partnership announcement. After Marcus left, Ryan closed the conference room door with the deliberate control of a man trying very hard not to slam it. What the hell is this? Grace, this is me being strategic about business relationships. Exactly like you suggested. You can't just steal our biggest client. I'm not stealing anything. I'm taking my relationships and my work to a new platform. Everything I'm doing is completely legal and ethical. Legal and ethical. Ryan's voice rose to a pitch I'd never heard before. We built this company together. You can't just leave. Why not? Because we're partners. Because this is our life's work. Because you're being completely irrational. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my skirt and checking my watch, the Cartier I'd bought myself last Christmas, when Ryan had given me a gift card to a spa. Because apparently what I needed was relaxation rather than recognition. Ryan, you've spent the last week making it very clear that I'm not your partner in the ways that matter. I'm your business associate who handles the administrative details while you focus on the real work. I'm the woman who takes care of practical concerns while you explore more interesting relationships. That's not Sophia, is just Sophia is exactly what you've always wanted. She's brilliant without being threatening, successful without being competitive, beautiful without being challenging. She's everything I'm not, and everything you wish I was. Ryan sank into his chair like a deflated balloon. Grace, please, don't do this. We can work through whatever problems we're having. We don't have problems. Ryan, we have fundamental incompatibilities that I've been managing for 10 years while you waited for someone better to come along. I moved toward the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. The contract signing is still happening. Marcus is expecting it, and I won't let my personal situation interfere with a professional commitment. But after today, Horizon Corp will be working exclusively with Innovate Tech, along with about 60% of our current client base. 60%. The 60% that came to us through my relationships and my work, the clients who trust me, rather than the TechFlow brand. I opened the door and found Marcus waiting in the hallway, coffee in hand and looking diplomatically oblivious to the raised voices that had undoubtedly been audible through the conference room walls. Ready to make this official? I asked with a smile that felt more genuine than any expression I'd worn in weeks. The signing took 15 minutes. Marcus asked intelligent questions about transition timelines and team continuity, which I answered with the kind of detailed preparation that had made him want to work with me in the first place. Ryan sat through the entire process in stunned silence, occasionally offering input when directly asked, but mostly watching his business empire crumble in real time. After Marcus left, I packed my personal items from my office, the awards I'd won, the client photos I'd accumulated, the small touches that had made the space feel like home. Ryan followed me around like a lost puppy, alternating between anger and desperation. This is insane. Grace, you're throwing away everything we built together. I'm taking what I built and giving it room to grow. What about us? What about our relationship? I stopped packing and looked at him directly for the first time all day. What relationship, Ryan? The one where you protect other women from me. The one where your ex-crush gets to sleep in our bed while I hide in the guest room. The one where 10 years of my work gets dismissed as administrative support. I never said you didn't have to say it. You showed me exactly what you think of me the moment you brought her home. Ryan's face crumpled with something that might have been genuine remorse if it hadn't been accompanied by such obvious panic about losing his business anchor. Grace, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Sophia doesn't mean anything to me, not the way you do. She's familiar. She reminds me of a time when things were simpler. She reminds you of a time when you didn't have to choose between your fantasy and your reality. Well, congratulations, Ryan. Now you don't have to choose. You can have your white moonlight and all the simplicity that comes with her. I closed the last box and hefted it into my arms. But you can't have me too. The elevator ride to the parking garage felt like a funeral procession for the life I'd thought I wanted. But when I loaded my boxes into my car and pulled out of the TechFlow parking lot for the last time, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The electric thrill of unlimited possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. Team meeting at the new office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Should I bring champagne? I smiled as I navigated through San Francisco traffic toward my temporary apartment, toward my new company, toward a future I'd build entirely on my own terms. Bring champagne. I texted back. We're celebrating a new beginning. Behind me, TechFlow Solutions continued to exist in the building where Ryan and I had dreamed of changing the world, but ahead of me, Innovate Tech was waiting to actually do it, and this time, I wouldn't have to share credit with anyone who'd forgotten what I was worth. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a strange state of suspended animation. My new office space wasn't ready yet, so Innovate Tech existed primarily as a collection of signed contracts, ambitious plans, and a team of brilliant engineers working from coffee shops across San Francisco. Meanwhile, my personal life had been reduced to a furnished studio apartment in Soma and the carefully orchestrated avoidance of anywhere Ryan and Sophia might appear. It should have been depressing. Instead, it felt like the most honest I'd been with myself in years. I was reviewing proposals for office furniture when Janet called with gossip that made me set down my coffee to give her my full attention. "You're not going to believe what happened at TechFlow yesterday," she said without preamble. "I'm not sure I want to know." "Oh, you definitely want to know. Remember how Sophia always had these brilliant business insights? Administrative suggestions. You mean, right. Well, apparently she's been sharing more of her wisdom. Kevin told me that in yesterday's all-hands meeting. She suggested they could recover from losing the Horizon contract by lowering their prices across the board. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Please tell me Ryan didn't listen to her. Oh, he listened. He's implementing a 20% price reduction on all new contracts, effective immediately. 20%, I nearly choked on my coffee. That's going to kill their margins. It gets better. When the engineering team pointed out that a 20% price cut would require either laying off staff or slashing salaries, guess what Sophia's solution was? I'm afraid to ask. Salary cuts. across the board because, and I quote, everyone should share in the sacrifice to help the company grow. I was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of this strategic disaster. Ryan might have been distracted by his reunion with his college crush, but he'd run a successful business for 10 years. Surely he couldn't be this naive about basic economics. Janet, please tell me you're exaggerating. I wish I was. Sarah from marketing called me this morning. She's already updating her LinkedIn profile. After I hung up, I sat in my empty apartment staring at the San Francisco skyline and feeling something uncomfortably close to pity for Ryan. Sophia's advice wasn't just bad, it was systematically destructive in a way that seemed almost intentional. Cut prices, cut salaries, avoid networking, wait for opportunities to magically appear. It was like a masterclass in how to destroy a thriving business while maintaining plausible deniability. The scary part was how reasonable each suggestion sounded in isolation. Lowering prices to compete. That's basic market strategy. Reducing overhead during tough times. Responsible leadership. Focusing on product quality rather than sales tactics. Admirable integrity. It was only when you stepped back and looked at the pattern that you could see what Sophia was really doing. Systematically undermining every competitive advantage TechFlow had built, one gentle suggestion at a time. My phone rang. Ryan's name on the screen made my stomach clench with a mixture of anticipation and dread that I'd hoped to be past by now. Grace, I need to talk to you. We don't have anything to talk about. Ryan, please. Can we meet for coffee? 30 minutes. I know you hate me right now, but I need your advice about something. The old Grace would have said yes immediately, would have dropped everything to help solve whatever crisis was threatening the company we'd built together. The new Grace had learned to ask better questions. What kind of advice? Business advice about TechFlow, about how to. He paused, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. About how to fix what I've broken. You broke more than business systems. Ryan, I know. God, Grace, I know. But right now, I'm about to lose everything, and I don't know how to stop it. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at Blue Bottle Coffee in Hayes Valley neutral territory where we'd never been together, where there were no memories to navigate around. He looked terrible. The Ryan who'd always prided himself on his polished appearance had been replaced by someone who'd clearly been sleeping poorly and stress-eating badly. His usual confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a man who looked like he was drowning in real time. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down across from him with my oat milk latte. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Grace, I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen. When Sophia came back, I thought I could handle it. I thought I could help her without it affecting us. How's that working out for you?" He laughed bitterly. "About as well as every other decision I've made in the last month. She's been staying with me, giving me all this business advice, and I've been listening because..." He trailed off, staring into his coffee like it might contain answers. "Because she's your white moonlight, and you've never been able to think clearly around her. Because I'm an idiot who confused nostalgia with wisdom." Ryan looked up at me with something that might have been clarity. "Grace, she's been sabotaging the company." I kept my expression carefully neutral. "That's a serious accusation." "Is it an accusation if it's true? Every piece of advice she's given me has made things worse. The price cuts, the salary reductions, the passive approach to client development. It's like she's systematically destroying everything we built, everything you built. I corrected. I'm not part of TechFlow anymore. Remember, everything I built with your help, everything I'm losing because I was too stupid to recognize what I had. I sipped my latte and studied his face. The panic was real, but so was something else, a dawning awareness that felt almost like the old Ryan, the one who'd been smart enough to recognize good advice when he heard it. What do you want from me? Ryan, I want you to come back. That's not happening. Then I want you to tell me how to fix this, how to save the company, how to undo the damage. You always knew how to solve problems I couldn't even see. I was quiet for a long moment, watching him fidget with his wedding ring weight. No, the Omega watch. Of course, he was wearing the Omega watch to our coffee meeting, probably without even realizing the symbolism. Ryan, do you remember what you used to say about competitors who made desperate moves? That desperation makes you stupid. That desperation makes you take advice from people who don't understand your business. I leaned forward slightly. Sophia doesn't understand your business. She's never run a tech startup, never managed client relationships in this industry, never had to balance innovation with profitability in a competitive market. But she went to Stanford Business School 10 years ago, and then she married a man wealthy enough to support her while she figured out what she wanted to do with her life. Her business experience is theoretical at best. Ryan was nodding now, the pieces clicking into place with visible relief. So the advice she's been giving me is what sounds good in a classroom but doesn't work in reality. You know what does work? Building actual relationships with clients. Pricing your services based on value, not fear, treating your employees like assets to invest in rather than expenses to minimize. Everything you were doing, everything I was doing while you dismissed it as networking and administrative support. The hurt in my voice surprised both of us. I'd thought I was past caring about his opinion of my work, but apparently some wounds take longer to heal than others. Grace, I never meant to dismiss what you do. I know how hard you work, how much of our success comes from your relationships and your strategic thinking. Do you? Because when Sophia called it desperate networking and administrative support, you agreed with her. I was trying to keep the peace between two people I care about. No, Ryan, you were choosing between two versions of yourself. The version that had built a successful company with a woman who challenged him to be better, and the version that could retreat into a college fantasy where success came easily and choices didn't have consequences. He winced like I'd struck him. That's not fair. Fair would have been you defending my work instead of letting another woman criticize it in our own home. Fair would have been you sleeping in the guest room instead of letting her take over our bedroom. Fair would have been you remembering that I'm your partner, not your employee. You're right. About all of it. Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper. Grace, I fucked up everything. Our relationship, our company, our future. And I don't know how to fix it. You can't fix it. That's what you need to understand. Some things, once broken, don't go back together the same way. So what do? I finished my latte and stood up. Gathering my purse and my dignity, you figure out who you want to be going forward. The man who built something meaningful with a real partner, or the man who throws it all away for a fantasy that was never as perfect as you remembered. What about TechFlow? What about it? How do I save it? I paused at his table, looking down at this man I'd loved for 10 years. This brilliant engineer who'd forgotten how to think strategically the moment his past walked back into his life. Stop taking advice from people who've never done what you're trying to do. Start listening to the employees who've stayed loyal to you despite everything. And for God's sake, stop cutting prices to compete with companies that are better at competing on price. That's it. That's it. Basic business sense that you used to have before you let nostalgia override your judgment. I walked toward the door, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Ryan, next time you're tempted to believe that success should come easily, remember that the woman who actually helped you build your company is about to put you out of business using the relationships you thought were beneath her to cultivate. His face went pale. Grace, I'm not going to destroy TechFlow. Ryan, I don't need to. You've already done that yourself. I left him sitting in the coffee shop, staring after me with the expression of a man who'd finally understood the game he'd been playing, just in time to realize he'd already lost. Outside, San Francisco's afternoon fog was rolling in from the bay, turning the familiar city skyline soft and dreamlike. But my mind was crystal clear as I walked back to my car. My phone already buzzing with messages from potential clients who'd heard about Innovate Tech and wanted to know more. Ryan had spent 2 weeks learning what happened when you tried to run a tech company based on fantasy and wishful thinking. Now he could spend the next few months learning what it felt like to compete against someone who'd never forgotten that business was about results, not sentiment. I'd offered him good advice because, despite everything, I didn't want to watch him fail completely. Whether he was smart enough to take it was his choice to make. But either way, it was no longer my problem to solve. 3 months later, Innovate Tech was thriving in ways that surprised even me. Our Soma office space hummed with the productive energy of a team that knew they were building something special. We'd landed 6 major contracts in our first quarter, including a partnership with a Fortune 500 financial services company that had specifically sought us out after hearing about our work with Horizon Corp. Meanwhile, TechFlow was hemorrhaging clients, talent, and money with the predictable efficiency of a company following disastrous advice while refusing to acknowledge the source of the problem. I was reviewing quarterly projections when Janet knocked on my office door with the expression she wore when she had particularly interesting gossip. "Grace, you need to see this." She handed me her tablet. Open to LinkedIn. Kevin just posted his resignation letter. Kevin Rodriguez had been TechFlow's senior systems architect for 4 years, brilliant, loyal, and completely uninterested in workplace drama. If Kevin was publicly resigning, things had gotten catastrophically bad. His post was diplomatically worded but devastatingly clear. After careful consideration, I've decided to pursue new opportunities that better align with my professional values and growth objectives. I'm grateful for my time at TechFlow and wish my former colleagues continued success. The comments section told the real story. 3 other TechFlow employees had already replied with variations of best of luck in your future endeavors. Corporate speak for I'm jumping ship too. How many does that make? I asked, including Kevin. 7 resignations in 6 weeks. Janet settled into the chair across from my desk. Word is that Ryan tried to implement another round of salary cuts last week, and the engineering team essentially revolted. Salary cuts. Again. Apparently, Sophia convinced him that reducing operational costs was the only way to maintain competitive pricing. Janet paused. Grace, I have to ask, are you secretly paying her to sabotage TechFlow? Because she's doing a better job of destroying that company than any competitor could. I laughed despite myself. I don't need to pay anyone to sabotage TechFlow. Ryan's doing it himself by listening to someone who fundamentally doesn't understand how tech companies work. It's actually kind of fascinating from a psychological perspective. She gives him advice that sounds reasonable on the surface, but systematically undermines everything that made TechFlow successful. And he follows it because she's his white moonlight and he's never been able to think clearly around her. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, 2 p.m. meeting with Marcus Thompson to discuss expanding our partnership with Horizon Corp. 3 months ago. I'd been proud to land their initial contract. Today, we were discussing a 3-year, $10 million expansion that would position Innovate Tech as their primary technology partner. Life had a delicious sense of irony sometimes. I need to prep for my Horizon meeting. I told Janet, but keep me posted on the TechFlow situation. I'm curious to see how much more damage Sophia can do before Ryan realizes what's happening. Assuming he ever realizes what's happening. Oh, he'll realize. The question is whether it'll be before or after TechFlow goes under completely. The Horizon meeting went better than I'd hoped. Marcus Thompson had become one of my biggest advocates, praising Innovate Tech's responsiveness and innovation in ways that made me remember why I'd loved building businesses in the first place. When you worked with clients who respected your expertise and valued your contributions, success felt effortless rather than desperate. Grace, I have to tell you, Marcus said as we wrapped up, choosing to partner with your new company was one of the best decisions we made this year. Your team's approach to problem solving is exactly what we needed. I appreciate that. Marcus, we believe in building long-term partnerships based on mutual respect and shared success. It shows, actually, I've been recommending Innovate Tech to colleagues in other industries. I hope you don't mind the unsolicited referrals. I smiled. I never mind good clients bringing me more good clients. As I walked back to my office, I reflected on how different this felt from the old days of chasing contracts and proving my worth over and over again. When you delivered consistent value and worked with people who appreciated it, business development became a natural extension of good work rather than a frantic scramble for validation. My phone rang just as I reached my desk. The caller ID made me pause. Dr. Patricia Chen, my former therapist and no relation despite the shared surname. I'd seen her for 6 months after a particularly difficult client situation 2 years ago, and she'd given me tools for managing stress and setting boundaries that had served me well during recent upheavals. Dr. Chen, this is unexpected. Grace, I hope you don't mind me calling. I have something of an unusual situation, and I thought you might be able to help. Of course. What's going on? I have a client. I can't share specifics. Obviously. But she's asking for recommendations for technology consultants. Specifically, she wants to work with women-owned businesses that specialize in AI applications for small to medium enterprises. I felt a familiar flutter of excitement. That's exactly our sweet spot. I thought it might be, would you be interested in a referral? She's looking to completely overhaul her business systems. And from what I understand, budget isn't a primary constraint. I'd love to hear more. Excellent. I'll have her contact you directly. Grace, I have to say you sound really good. Centered and confident in a way that's different from when we worked together. I feel different. More aligned, I guess. Like I'm finally working on the right problems with the right people. That's wonderful to hear. I'm proud of you for making the changes you needed to make, even when they were difficult. After we hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the San Francisco skyline and feeling something I'd almost forgotten. Complete professional satisfaction, no anxiety about whether my work was valued, no stress about proving my worth. No exhaustion from managing other people's egos along with my own responsibilities. This was what business felt like when you weren't constantly swimming upstream. My contentment was interrupted by my assistant's voice through the intercom. "Grace, there's someone here to see you." She says her name is Sophia Blair and that it's personal. I felt my stomach drop and my pulse quicken simultaneously. Did she say what she wanted? Just that she needed to speak with you privately about a mutual acquaintance. I took a deep breath and checked my reflection in my computer screen. Professional armor. Check. Emotional defenses. Engaged. Send her in. Sophia entered my office with the same ethereal grace she'd displayed in my apartment 3 months ago. But something had changed. Her designer clothes were still impeccable, but there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested her serene confidence had developed some cracks. "Grace, thank you for seeing me. I know this is awkward, but I felt we should talk." "About what?" "About Ryan. About what's happening with TechFlow." Sophia settled into the chair across from my desk with practiced elegance. "I think there's been some miscommunication about my role in recent developments." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. "What kind of miscommunication?" "I've been trying to help Ryan navigate some difficult business decisions, but I'm concerned that my suggestions might have been misinterpreted or poorly implemented." "Misinterpreted how?" "Well, for instance, when I suggested that TechFlow could be more price competitive, I meant strategic pricing adjustments, not across-the-board cuts. And when I mentioned reducing operational costs, I was thinking about efficiency improvements, not salary reductions." I nodded thoughtfully. "I see. So Ryan misunderstood your advice and implemented it incorrectly." "Exactly." Relief flooded her voice. "I'm so glad you understand. You know how Ryan can be. When he's stressed, he doesn't always think through the implications of his decisions." I tapped my pen against my desk, pretending to consider her explanation. "Sophia, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why are you here?" "I'm sorry. You could have this conversation with Ryan. You could clarify your advice with him directly. Help him understand what you really meant. Why come to me?" Sophia's composure flickered for just a moment before reassembling itself. "Because I think Ryan listens to you in ways he doesn't listen to other people. And because I'm worried about him." "You're worried about him?" "Yes. He's been struggling since you left. The business problems, the stress, the guilt about how things ended between you two. I think he'd benefit from hearing that you don't hold grudges, that you want him to succeed even if you can't be together." I set down my pen and looked directly into Sophia's carefully composed face. "Sophia, let me be very clear about something. I don't hold grudges because I don't need to. Ryan made his choices, and now he's living with the consequences. Whether TechFlow succeeds or fails is no longer my concern. But surely you don't want to see him lose everything." "What I want is irrelevant. Ryan is a grown man who chose to take business advice from someone with no relevant experience because she reminded him of simpler times. That's not my problem to solve." Sophia's mask slipped entirely now, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "You know, Grace, I understand why Ryan was attracted to you. You're very practical, but practicality isn't everything. Sometimes people need dreams, inspiration, the possibility of something more beautiful than just grinding success." "Is that what you offered him?" "Beautiful dreams." I offered him the chance to remember who he was before he got so caught up in profit margins and client relationships. Before he forgot that some things matter more than money. I smiled with genuine amusement. "Sophia, do you know what I think happened here?" "What?" I think you came back to San Francisco expecting to find the same young man who worshipped you in college. Instead, you found a successful businessman who'd built something meaningful with a woman who challenged him to be better than his younger self. And that threatened everything you believed about your own importance in his story. Sophia's face had gone very pale. That's not. So you decided to prove that his success was just luck, that he needed your wisdom to navigate the complexities of adult life. You gave him advice designed to fail, wrapped in language that sounded sophisticated and caring, and he followed it, because he never stopped believing you were smarter than everyone else in the room. You're wrong. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you spent 3 months systematically destroying everything Ryan built with me. And now you're here trying to blame him for misunderstanding your brilliant strategy. Sophia stood up abruptly, her composure finally shattering completely. You don't understand anything about Ryan and me. What we have is real. It's pure and uncomplicated and beautiful. You were just a placeholder until I was ready to come back. And how's that working out for you? Better than you might think. She smoothed down her skirt and rebuilt her smile from scratch. Ryan may be struggling professionally, but personally, he's never been happier. He tells me every day that having me back has reminded him what really matters in life. I'm sure it has. I stood up and moved toward my office door. Sophia, I think we're done here. Grace, wait! She caught my arm as I reached for the door handle. I came here to offer you something. What? A chance to be gracious in victory. Ryan still cares about you, maybe even loves you in his way. If you were to reach out, offer to help with TechFlow's problems, show him that you're the bigger person, he might realize what he lost. I stared at her for a long moment, marveling at the audacity. You want me to save the company you've spent 3 months destroying so that Ryan can appreciate my value while staying with you. I want you to do what's best for everyone involved. What's best for everyone involved is for Ryan to learn that actions have consequences, for TechFlow to succeed or fail based on actual business strategy rather than romantic nostalgia, and for both of us to move on with our lives. I opened the door and gestured toward the hallway. Good luck with everything. Sophia, I'm sure you and Ryan will be very happy together. As she walked past me, she paused and said quietly, You know he's gonna marry me. Right. He bought a ring last week. I felt a brief stab of something that might have been pain or might have been relief. Then I guess you got what you wanted. I always do. After she left, I sat alone in my office for several minutes, processing the conversation and its implications. Ryan was planning to propose to Sophia. TechFlow was collapsing under the weight of her advice, and somehow she'd convinced herself that this was a victory worth celebrating. I pulled out my phone and called Janet. How do you feel about attending a wedding? I asked when she picked up. Depends on whose wedding. Please tell me you're not thinking of reconciling with Ryan. Not exactly. But I think Sophia Blair is about to get everything she's been working toward. And I have a feeling it's going to be exactly what she deserves. Grace, that sounds ominous even for you. Not ominous. Poetic. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people have exactly what they think they want. Are you going to elaborate on that cryptic statement? Eventually. But first, I need to make some calls. I have a feeling there's going to be a very interesting wedding announcement soon, and I want to make sure I'm prepared to celebrate appropriately. As I hung up and returned to my quarterly projections, I reflected on Sophia's parting shot about Ryan buying a ring. She'd meant it to hurt me, to remind me of what I'd lost. Instead, it felt like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Soon, Ryan would discover what it was like to be married to someone who'd systematically destroyed his life's work while convincing him it was for his own good. And I would discover what it felt like to watch from a safe distance while two people got exactly what they'd been asking for all along. 6 months after leaving TechFlow, I received an elegant cream-colored invitation with gold lettering that managed to be both tasteful and ostentatious, exactly what I'd expect from an event planned by Sophia Blair. Ryan Mitchell and Sophia Blair request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. I studied the invitation over my morning coffee in Innovate Tech's break room, which had become my preferred thinking space when I needed to process something complicated. Janet found me there 20 minutes later, still holding the cardstock like it might spontaneously combust. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is," she said, settling into the chair across from me with her own coffee. "Depends on what you think it is. An invitation to watch your ex-boyfriend marry the woman who destroyed his company while pretending to be an innocent bystander. Then yes, it's exactly what you think it is." I handed her the invitation. "Look at the venue." Janet whistled low. "The Saint, Regis. That's a $30,000 wedding minimum." "How is Ryan paying for this?" "Good question. Last I heard, TechFlow was 3 months behind on rent and down to 4 employees. Maybe Sophia's family is paying, maybe. Or maybe Ryan's funding his dream wedding with credit cards and hope." Janet studied my face with the careful attention she usually reserved for debugging complex code. "Grace, please tell me you're not planning to do anything dramatic at this wedding." Define dramatic. Anything that involves speaking during the ceremony, confronting either of them publicly, or revealing information that might be considered revenge. I smiled and reclaimed the invitation. "Janet, I would never do anything so tacky as to make a scene at someone's wedding. That's not the reassurance I was hoping for. It's the only reassurance you're going to get." The truth was, I hadn't decided whether to attend at all. There was a case to be made for simply ignoring the invitation and moving on with my life. Innovate Tech was thriving. I'd started dating a brilliant venture capitalist who actually seemed to appreciate my ambition, and dwelling on Ryan's choices felt increasingly pointless. But there was also something to be said for witnessing the conclusion of a story I'd been involuntarily writing for 10 years. Sophia had spent months maneuvering Ryan into exactly this position, isolated from his support system, financially vulnerable, and completely dependent on her guidance. Now she was ready to claim her prize. I was curious to see what that victory looked like up close. 3 weeks later, I found myself standing outside the Saint Regis Hotel in a black Diane von Furstenberg dress that struck the perfect balance between appropriate guest attire and subtle reminder of my own success. I'd driven my new Tesla, another symbol of Innovate Tech's rapid growth, and used valet parking because walking into this particular lion's den required every psychological advantage I could muster. The lobby was decorated with white roses and gold accents that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Sophia had always had expensive taste. Apparently, marriage to a financially struggling entrepreneur hadn't changed that. I checked in with the reception staff and made my way to the ballroom. Accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and scanning the crowd for familiar faces, I recognized several former TechFlow employees who'd apparently maintained better relationships with Ryan than I had, along with what looked like an impressive collection of Sophia's Stanford Business School network, Grace fucking Chen. I turned to find David Park, TechFlow's former head of sales, grinning at me with the slightly manic energy of someone who'd had too much champagne too early in the evening. "Hello, David. You look well." "I look unemployed," he corrected cheerfully. "But thanks for the diplomatic phrasing. How's the new company treating you?" "Very well, thanks. I heard you left TechFlow. What are you doing now?" "Freelance consulting while I figure out my next move. Turns out the job market is pretty good for people with experience in companies that didn't completely implode under mysterious circumstances." I raised an eyebrow. "Mysterious circumstances? Come on, Grace." "You left. Took half the talent and most of the good clients with you, and suddenly Ryan started making business decisions that would make a first-year MBA student cringe. Either he had some kind of breakdown, or someone was giving him spectacularly bad advice. Maybe he just wasn't as good at running a company as we thought." Ryan Mitchell built TechFlow from nothing into an 8-figure business. Then he met an old girlfriend and suddenly forgot everything he knew about competitive strategy, client relations, and basic economics. David took a long sip of champagne. "That's not incompetence. That's sabotage." Before I could respond, the lights dimmed and a wedding coordinator began herding guests toward the ceremony space. I found a seat in the back row close enough to observe, far enough to avoid unwanted interactions, and watched as the processional began. Ryan stood at the altar looking pale but determined. Wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than TechFlow's current monthly revenue, he'd lost weight since I'd seen him last, and there was something hollow in his expression that suggested the stress of the past year had taken a real toll. Sophia appeared at the back of the aisle like a vision from a fairy tale. Her dress a masterpiece of silk and lace that transformed her into every man's fantasy of feminine perfection. She moved down the aisle with serene confidence, accepting the admiration of the assembled guests as her natural due. When she reached the altar and took Ryan's hands, I could see him relax for the first time since the ceremony began. Whatever doubts or fears had been plaguing him, Sophia's presence seemed to wash them away. She smiled at him with what looked like genuine affection, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for both of them. The ceremony proceeded with traditional vows and conventional rituals that felt oddly impersonal given the dramatic circumstances that had brought them to this moment. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, I felt every muscle in my body tense despite having no intention of speaking. But someone else did. "Actually, I have something to say." The voice came from the front row, and I recognized it immediately. Patricia Chen, Ryan's mother, whom I'd always liked despite her son's recent poor judgment. She stood up slowly, her elegant gray dress and dignified bearing commanding immediate attention. "Mom, what are you doing?" Ryan's voice carried clearly in the suddenly silent ballroom. "I'm sorry, Ryan, but I can't watch this without saying something." Patricia turned to face the assembled guests, her composure perfect despite the obvious tension. "I've watched my son struggle for the past year, making decisions that seemed completely out of character, destroying a business he built with tremendous pride and care." "Mrs. Mitchell," Sophia said gently, "perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No, dear, I think it's time for some public honesty." Patricia's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath the politeness. "You see, I've been doing some research since Ryan announced your engagement. Very thorough research into your background, your previous relationships, your business experience." My pulse quickened. I had no idea where this was going. But Patricia Mitchell had always been a formidable woman when she decided to take action. What I discovered was quite interesting. Your previous marriage. For instance, to David Hendricks, the pharmaceutical executive, divorced after 3 years when his company mysteriously suffered a series of strategic failures that left him personally bankrupt while you walked away with a very generous settlement. Sophia's face had gone completely white. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. Dear, I'm stating facts. Before David, there was Marcus Webb, the restaurant owner whose chain went from 15 locations to bankruptcy in 18 months while you were his business partner and fiancé. And before Marcus, there was James Chen, no relation to our lovely guest, Grace. I'm sure who lost his family's import business after taking your advice about international expansion strategies. The ballroom was dead silent now. Ryan was staring at his mother with growing horror. While Sophia looked like she was calculating her escape routes, I have documentation of all of this. If anyone is interested. Patricia continued conversationally. Financial records, court filings. A very enlightening conversation with David Hendricks about the woman he now refers to as the most expensive business lesson of his life. This is ridiculous, Sophia said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. These are all coincidences, are they? Because the pattern is remarkably consistent. You enter relationships with successful men, gradually insert yourself into their business decisions, provide advice that sounds reasonable, but systematically undermines their competitive advantages, and then disappear with whatever assets you can claim when everything collapses. Ryan looked like he was about to be sick. Mom, stop. This isn't Sophia, wouldn't Ryan? Darling, I've watched you for 31 years. You're brilliant, driven, and capable of extraordinary success when you trust your own judgment. But you're also romantic enough to believe that love conquers all. Even when all evidence suggests otherwise, Patricia turned back to the assembled guests, most of whom were now whispering frantically to each other or pulling out phones to document this unprecedented wedding disaster. I won't watch my son make the same mistake that destroyed 3 other men's lives. Sophia, you're a beautiful, intelligent woman, but you're also a predator who targets successful entrepreneurs during vulnerable moments in their lives. And Ryan, you're about to marry someone who has spent the last year systematically destroying everything you worked 10 years to build. That's enough. Sophia's composure finally cracked completely. These are lies and speculation. And are they lies? Patricia pulled out a manila folder from her purse. Because I have recordings of several conversations where you explicitly discussed your strategy for managing Ryan's business decisions, would you like me to play them for our guests? The threat hung in the air like a sword. Sophia looked around the ballroom desperately, searching for allies or escape routes, but finding only the fascinated stares of 200 wedding guests who were witnessing the most spectacular relationship implosion any of them had ever seen. Ryan stood frozen at the altar, his world crumbling in real time as he processed the implications of his mother's revelations. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Sophia, is any of this true? She turned to him with tears in her eyes, whether genuine or strategic. I couldn't tell. Ryan, you have to understand, everything I did was because I love you. I wanted to protect you from making the same mistakes as David and Marcus and James. I wanted to make sure you needed me, so you'd never leave me the way they did. You destroyed my company. I saved you from a business partnership that was holding you back. Grace never appreciated your real talents. She just used you for your technical skills, while she took credit for all the success. The ballroom erupted in murmurs at this, since most of the former TechFlow employees present knew exactly how wrong that characterization was. I felt a brief flare of anger on my own behalf, but mostly I felt something like pity for this woman who'd confused manipulation with love for so long that she might actually believe her own lies. Ryan stepped back from Sophia as if she'd physically struck him. "Get out." "What?" "Get out. Get out of here. Get out of my life. Get out of everything. I never want to see you again." Sophia's careful composure finally shattered completely. "You can't do this to me. I gave up everything for you. I left my life in London. I invested months in helping you. You invested months in destroying me," Ryan said quietly, "and apparently I'm not the first." Security had appeared from somewhere, probably summoned by the hotel staff, who'd clearly decided this drama was beyond what they were paid to handle. Sophia allowed herself to be escorted out, but not before delivering one final parting shot. "You'll never find anyone else who understands you the way I do. You'll spend the rest of your life regretting this." After she was gone, the ballroom remained eerily quiet for several long moments. 200 wedding guests sat in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. Ryan stood alone at the altar, still in his expensive tuxedo, looking like a man who'd just watched his entire understanding of reality collapse. Patricia Mitchell walked up to her son and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know this isn't how you wanted your wedding day to go. How long have you known?" Ryan's voice was hollow. "I suspected something was wrong about 3 months ago. When you started making business decisions that seemed completely unlike you, I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago." She paused. "I was hoping I was wrong. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me. You needed to see it for yourself." Ryan nodded slowly, then turned to address the assembled guests. "I'm sorry you all came here for nothing. The reception is paid for, so please stay and enjoy the food and music. I need some time to process this." He walked down the aisle with as much dignity as a man could muster under the circumstances, leaving behind 200 guests, an elaborate wedding setup, and the ruins of what he'd thought was his fairy tale ending. I waited until most of the crowd had moved to the reception area before approaching Patricia, who was gathering her purse and the manila folder that had just destroyed her son's wedding. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm Grace Chen." She turned and smiled with genuine warmth. "Grace, I was hoping you'd be here. How are you?" "Dear, I'm well, thank you. I have to say, that was quite a revelation. It was necessary." Ryan's always been too trusting for his own good, especially when it comes to beautiful women with sad stories. She paused. "I hope you know that I never blamed you for leaving. After watching what Sophia put him through, I understand why you couldn't stay. Thank you for saying that. Grace, can I ask you something? Do you think there's any chance that Ryan could rebuild TechFlow? I know the damage has been extensive, but he's still brilliant, still capable. I considered the question carefully. It's possible, but it would require him to acknowledge his mistakes, rebuild his team, and fundamentally change his approach to business partnerships. It would also require him to stop looking for external validation and start trusting his own judgment again. Do you think he's capable of that kind of change? I think today might be exactly the wake-up call he needed. Whether he learns from it or just finds new ways to repeat old patterns, that's up to him." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "Grace, I know this might be presumptuous, But Ryan speaks about you with such regret, not just about losing you romantically, but about losing your partnership, your guidance, your friendship. Is there any chance? Mrs. Mitchell, I appreciate what you're saying, but Ryan and I are in very different places now. He needs to figure out who he wants to be going forward, and I've already built the life I want without him. Of course, I just thought, well, you two were so good together professionally. It seemed like such a waste. I smiled gently. It wasn't a waste. Everything we built together taught me what I was capable of achieving. I just needed to do it on my own terms. As I left the hotel, I reflected on the dramatic turn the evening had taken. I'd come expecting to witness Sophia's triumph and Ryan's final capitulation to her manipulation. Instead, I'd watched her carefully constructed facade crumble under the weight of her own pattern of destruction. There was something almost tragic about it. Sophia was clearly intelligent and capable, but she'd chosen to use those gifts to tear down rather than build up. She'd confused control with love, manipulation with partnership, and temporary victories with lasting success. Now she was alone again, her reputation destroyed, her carefully laid plans in ruins, and Ryan was finally free to discover who he could become when he stopped trying to recreate his college fantasies. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. How was the wedding? Please tell me you didn't do anything that will require legal representation. I smiled as I typed back, the wedding was canceled. Sophia's previous victims showed up via proxy. Justice was served, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Wait, what? I need details immediately. Tomorrow, I replied. Tonight, I'm going home to my apartment that I chose, to work on projects that fulfill me with a clear conscience and zero regrets. As I drove through San Francisco's evening traffic, I thought about Patricia's question regarding Ryan's ability to rebuild. The truth was, I hoped he could, not because I wanted him back in my life, but because I believed in redemption stories where people learned from their mistakes and became better versions of themselves. But his redemption wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd spent 10 years investing in Ryan's potential, and now it was time to see what I could accomplish when all that energy was directed toward my own dreams. Innovate Tech was thriving. My personal life was fulfilling. And I'd just witnessed the spectacular conclusion of a chapter that had defined my 20s. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and continue building the life I'd designed for myself, one where my worth wasn't contingent on someone else's recognition, where my success wasn't undermined by hidden agendas, and where my future was limited only by my own ambition and imagination. It felt like the best wedding gift I could have asked for, the confirmation that I'd made exactly the right choice in walking away from a story that was never really mine to begin with. 2 years later, I was reviewing acquisition proposals in my corner office at Innovate Tech, now a 40-person company with clients across 3 countries, when my assistant knocked with an expression that suggested either very good news or very complicated news. Grace, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Who is it? Ryan Mitchell. I felt my stomach do a small flip, which annoyed me. I thought I was completely past having involuntary physical reactions to Ryan's name, but apparently some neural pathways take longer to rewire than others. Did he say what he wanted? Just that it was about a business opportunity that might interest you. I glanced at my calendar. I had 30 minutes before my next meeting with a potential investor from London, someone who was considering backing Innovate Tech's European expansion, enough time for whatever conversation Ryan needed to have, but not enough to get trapped in something emotionally complicated. Send him in." Ryan entered my office looking like a man who'd spent 2 years learning hard lessons. He was thinner than I remembered, dressed in a well-fitted but modest suit that suggested financial recovery without the flashy success of our TechFlow days. Most notably, he wasn't wearing the Omega watch. "Grace, thank you for seeing me." "Ryan," I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "You look well." "Thank you." "You look," he paused, taking in my office with its view of the Bay Bridge, the awards on my walls, the visible signs of a business that had grown far beyond what we'd built together. "You look like you're exactly where you belong." I studied his face, searching for the desperate energy that had characterized our last few interactions. Instead, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine peace. "How are you doing?" "Ryan, really, better than I have any right to be, considering how spectacularly I destroyed everything 2 years ago." He settled into the chair with the careful posture of someone who'd learned not to take comfort for granted. I spent about 6 months after the wedding debacle feeling sorry for myself. And then I decided that wallowing wasn't going to fix anything. "What did you do?" I sold what was left of TechFlow to a competitor who wanted our client list and some of our intellectual property, used the money to pay off debts, and fund a much smaller venture focused on educational technology for underserved communities. I raised an eyebrow. Educational technology. Turns out there's a market for affordable AI tutoring systems in public schools. The profit margins are smaller than what we used to chase, but the impact is... He smiled with genuine satisfaction. "It feels like I'm actually solving problems that matter." That sounds fulfilling. It is. And it's taught me something important about the difference between building a business and building a life. I leaned back in my chair, curious despite myself. What's the difference? Building a business is about market opportunities and competitive advantages and scalable revenue models. Building a life is about doing work that aligns with your values, with people who share your vision in ways that make you proud to get up every morning. And you couldn't do both. I couldn't do both while trying to recreate some fantasy version of my younger self. I spent so much energy chasing an idealized past that I completely lost sight of what was actually working in my present. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment while I processed this unexpectedly mature perspective from a man who'd once chosen nostalgia over partnership. "Ryan, why are you here?" "Because I have a proposition that I think might interest you, and because I owe you an apology that I should have given you 2 years ago." "I don't need an apology." "Maybe not, but I need to give one." Ryan leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "Grace, what I did to you bringing Sophia into our home, dismissing your work, choosing fantasy over reality was unforgivable. You spent 10 years building something meaningful with me, and I threw it away for a college crush who never cared about me at all." "Ryan, please, let me finish. You were the best partner I ever had. In business and in life, you were smarter than me about clients, more strategic about growth, better at seeing the big picture while still managing the details. And instead of appreciating what we'd built together, I got seduced by someone who told me pretty lies about my natural talents. I felt an unexpected tightness in my throat. Thank you for saying that. It's not just true. It's obvious. Everyone who worked with us knew that you were the strategic brain behind TechFlow's success. I was just too insecure to admit it, even to myself. Insecure? Grace, you're brilliant, ambitious, and completely comfortable with your own success. That's intimidating for someone who grew up believing that men were supposed to be the primary breadwinners and women were supposed to be supportive partners. It took me 2 years of therapy to understand that my attraction to Sophia wasn't about love. It was about finding someone who made me feel important instead of challenged. I stared at him in surprise. This level of self-awareness was entirely new for Ryan, and I wasn't sure how to respond to it. Anyway, he continued, I wanted you to know that I understand what I lost, and I take full responsibility for losing it. You didn't leave because you were jealous or petty or unreasonable. You left because I stopped being worthy of your partnership. Ryan, I appreciate this. But you didn't come here just to apologize. No, I didn't. He smiled with something that looked like nervous excitement. I came here because I think I have an opportunity that might be perfect for Innovate Tech, but only if you're interested in working with me again. Professionally, he added quickly. I'm not asking for anything personal. What kind of opportunity? The Gates Foundation is looking for technology partners to develop AI-powered educational tools for developing countries. It's a 5-year, $50 million initiative that could reach millions of students worldwide. My pulse quickened. This was exactly the kind of high-impact, scalable project that could establish Innovate Tech as a major player in the social innovation space. What's your connection to the Gates Foundation? My educational technology work caught their attention. They're interested in my expertise in affordable AI applications, but they need a partner with the infrastructure and international experience to handle implementation at scale. And you thought of Innovate Tech. I thought of you, Grace. You're the only person I know who has the strategic vision to make this work. The business development skills to navigate a partnership, this complex, and the technical team to deliver on promises this ambitious. I was quiet for several minutes, thinking through the implications. A Gates Foundation partnership would be transformational for Innovate Tech, but it would also mean working closely with Ryan for several years. What would this partnership look like? My company would handle the educational design and affordability optimization. Innovate Tech would handle the technical infrastructure, international deployment, and overall program management. We'd split the revenue based on contribution levels that we'd negotiate up front, and you'd be comfortable with me being the senior partner in that arrangement. Ryan smiled with what looked like genuine relief. Grace, I've spent 2 years learning to be comfortable with my actual talents rather than my imagined ones. My strength is in creating elegant technical solutions for specific problems. Your strength is in scaling those solutions and turning them into sustainable businesses. This project needs both, but it needs your skills more than mine. I stood up and walked to my window, looking out at the San Francisco skyline while I considered the opportunity. It was remarkable that Ryan had evolved this much in 2 years. But people were capable of real change when they had sufficient motivation. I'd need to see the full proposal, talk to my team, and have my lawyers review any partnership structure. Of course. And I'd need guarantees that this is purely professional. No personal drama, no revisiting old relationship issues, no complications that could interfere with the project. Absolutely. I'm actually seeing someone, a teacher I met through my educational technology work, someone who appreciates what I'm building now rather than mourning what I used to have. I turned back to face him, surprised by the small twinge of something I felt at this news. Not jealousy, exactly, but perhaps a final recognition that the chapter of our lives where we'd been central to each other's stories was definitively closed. I'm glad you found someone who makes you happy. Thank you. And Grace, I hope you know that your success with Innovate Tech doesn't surprise me at all. You were always destined for this level of achievement. I just wish I'd been smart enough to support it instead of feeling threatened by it. After Ryan left, I sat in my office for a long time, processing our conversation and its implications. The Gates Foundation opportunity was extraordinary, but partnering with Ryan again felt like walking through a minefield of potential complications. On the other hand, I'd built Innovate Tech specifically to tackle projects that could create meaningful impact at scale. This was exactly the kind of work I'd dreamed of doing when I'd started my own company. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. 15 minutes until my meeting with the London investor. I straightened my blazer, touched up my lipstick, and prepared to discuss Innovate Tech's European expansion plans with someone who understood that successful women didn't need to apologize for their ambitions. But first, I sent a quick message to my lawyer. Need you to review a potential partnership agreement. High stakes, complicated history, extraordinary opportunity. When can we meet? The response came back immediately. Tomorrow morning. Should I prepare for complicated? I smiled as I typed, prepare for interesting. I think I'm about to make a decision that will either be brilliant or completely insane. As I gathered my materials for the investor meeting, I reflected on how different this felt from the old days of building TechFlow. Back then, every business decision had been colored by personal dynamics, romantic complications, and the exhausting work of managing Ryan's ego alongside my own ambitions. Now, I had the luxury of making purely strategic choices. If partnering with Ryan made sense for Innovate Tech and the Gates Foundation project, I could do it without worrying about hidden agendas or emotional manipulation. If it didn't make sense, I could walk away without guilt or regret. The freedom to choose based solely on business merit felt like the ultimate victory, not over Ryan or Sophia, but over the version of myself who'd once believed that professional success required personal sacrifice. I'd built something extraordinary from the ashes of that old life. Now I got to decide whether those ashes could nurture something even better, or whether it was time to find entirely new ground to cultivate. Either way, the choice was entirely mine.